myself, not hide behind the words I wrote for someone else. No politics to obscure and wordy rhyme. I'll simply say that anytime I see a woman's pain, it feels like mine. I write this song about myself. I write this song about myself. I write this song about myself.
This is Jam Today 3, and we are
Jam Today 3.
My name is Terry. I play guitar, then I play guitar, and I wrote a lot of the pieces.
My name's Jackie, I play the drums.
My name's Fran and I was the sound engineer.
My name's Barbara and I was the singer, and I subsequently learned to play the bass guitar, but I didn't do it then.
And my name's Alison and I was a bass player. For us, for Terry and I, but Terry can speak for herself obviously, Terry and I, we were in Jam Today 2 before Jam Today 3. But when Josephina left, we didn't have a drummer. And so what we were doing just prior to that, I think, was we had a number of gigs that we'd set up for Jam Today 2 that we couldn't do. So we got our friends who were in a band called Tour de Force. They did the gigs. We did the PA and drove the van with Fran, wasn't it? Fran, you and me, Fran, Terry and I. So we were kind of in this strange hiatus where, you know, we'd kind of set up one band and it didn't kind of happen quite right, or it did for a bit, not for long, and then we were kind of in between.
You know, I'd done various things as a singer before, including singing with Ronnie Scott's band and stuff. Ronnie Scott at the jazz thing that he ran. And I was living in the East End, and I saw that when I got into Spoils Sports, it's because I saw an ad in Melody Maker. They wanted a singer, and it was quite interesting because that was my first shift from a relatively straight musical world into the feminist musical world, which I was very happy about. That was fine with me. And I had a little boy. I was a mum at the time with my son Harry, who is now a drummer.
I can't remember specifically between Jam Today 1, 2 or 3, but around that time what I was doing was, because I'd spent time with Alison and Terry, Alison being my sister, and helping and being involved with the equipment and stuff, and we all wanted, in fact it was Terry and I particularly wanted to know a bit more about how the equipment worked and to make us more independent. So I was very interested in it, so I actually went to college and did a course which was called Electronics for Musical Instrument, and it was a very good sort of basic electronics course, but covering things like acoustics and speaker design and all sorts of things. But that basically gave me a skill and enabled me to be able to do sort of repairs and understand the equipment a lot more. Because not only did we use the equipment for the band, for our bands, but we also hired it out a lot over the years. And I think that surprised a few people. We would turn up.
Especially then.
Yes. Yeah. There were sort of 2 or 3 women lugging this PA and
knowing how to work it.
Yes.
Yeah. So that was my sort of prior to the beginnings of the band.
And then me. I'd been in some bands before meeting these women, and I think I just kind of got drafted in, really. So it was kind of an evolution, I think, of being in one band and knowing lots of people and just sort of being around at the right time.
I think you being available made the band possible. You probably don't realise how important you were, actually.
The 3 of them, I think
It was all serendipity or happenstance or one of those lovely words.
Synchronicity.
That's it, one of them. Barbara, because getting a singer that worked, and then we got Jackie.
And have a lovely voice.
And had a lovely
voice. A good singer.
That's what I mean, that we found, suddenly the whole thing made sense, and Julia as well. And the minute we all started to play together, it just worked.
It was difficult in the sense that it was slightly more difficult than now. You know, there were fewer. I mean, there aren't that many more. I don't think actually things have changed massively.
No, I don't.
But it was slightly more difficult. I mean, attitudes are a bit more open in terms of different things. You know, I mean, people are more relaxed about people being gay, and there's slightly different attitudes about women, especially if you live in London or certain parts of London. You know, things are much sort of, you know, more relaxed and more liberal. It was more uptight, and there was more aggro. I mean, I can remember lots and lots of times with heckling, physical violence against us.
For no reason, just because we were women.
Yeah. I mean, it was like, you know, like you get up on stage to play, and it's like, whoa, what's this? You know, we played in, I don't know, student unions, and we can all remember instances, can't we, of, you know, being sort of physical things happening, fights or being attacked.
But there were lots of really strange things. If you remember, we had the van.
God, how can you forget that damn van?
Because it was just under the limit, so we were able to drive. It was 1.25 tons.
No pellet.
What do you mean women couldn't have driven
No,
it?
you have to have an HGV to drive. But and whenever I used to go and fill it up, because I used to do a lion's share of the driving, I often would get a bloke saying to me, "Diesel." It's watched me climb out of the cab, and they would always come and say, "That is a diesel van." No.
I was playing music in the 70s and in different bands, women's bands, not feminist bands, and I have to say that there were lots of men involved when I got started who were very supportive at that point, and I have to say that I had quite an easy ride, I think, really, and there were chaps around who offered their time and expertise to help us. The only chaps I found that weren't helpful were in music shops. They just, you would go in there and try and get drumsticks, for instance, and they'd assume they were for someone else.
I don't think it's changed an awful lot.
No, I was going to say, it's a general perception that chaps in music stopped are very... So,
they're a bit sad.
but I can say that I was very fortunate in that, and I think maybe I'm unusual, I don't know, that, you know, there are chaps around there who are helpful and supportive, not all of them.
Well, it's interesting because, I mean, I remember thinking at the time, here am I, at the time as well, when I was joining those bands, I was the straight. I was in a heterosexual relationship, and I was the singer, and I'd been a singer for all my life. I remember as a little girl I could sing. It was just one of these things, and but it never occurred to me to learn to play an instrument. And I can remember thinking that lesbians who were not remotely interested in what men thought about them or anything like that were the ones who picked up instruments and played. I remember thinking that at the time, and it strikes me very forcibly now, in fact. Now, when I was in London, and I started to work in the women's music scene, it felt to me like it was a big statement and a big it just felt it was inherently political to do that, actually, because of all the reasons we've been saying. Really, it was quite a challenging thing, and there was loads and loads of women-only events which also felt kind of amazing. I mean, if you know, in the 1950s, and it wasn't as though women going out together and there was no men there. It was as though nothing was happening, really. That was, you know, so to have whole dues where men weren't included at all was a massively sort of ideologically significant thing to do. Well, I know that there's been a bit of a sort of controversial debate about whether or not playing electric instruments was in some way not not feminist enough or not revolutionary enough or something or other. And that it's aping men.
And rock.
Yeah.
And rock.
It's just in some way aping men's music or something or other.
But you always have those extremes, didn't you? There were those people who thought we shouldn't play anything and we shouldn't invent new instruments. No, can't be doing that.
The overmatron.
Yes.
Oh, that's good.
I think actually having women's music and play, it was like a central point where women could go. There was an entertainment, if you like, and sort of political discussion. But it was kind of like a rallying point where women could all meet together and have a good time, but you know, where they felt that they could be safe most of the time, as long as they were inside. You know, I think it was incredibly important having not just the live music but the discos as well, because you know there were a lot of women's discos that made you know.
I think it's important to say that not everybody who came to those gigs was a lesbian. I mean, the women were coming because women wanted to be and talk to other women.
Well, they were feminists, not lesbian feminists.
But that was always the impression, and a lot of women wouldn't call themselves feminists because it came to mean lesbian, which it didn't. It meant, you know, you could be whatever you were. That was the whole point. To be free to be who you wanted to be.
Yeah, in an open space.
I thought there was sometimes a bit of a conflict because you got this kind of sometimes, and actually something I still experience sometimes, which is that slight conflict between a social occasion and what you're trying to achieve artistically. And you sometimes could have slight difficulties with people who just wanted to hang out with their friends and talk
and not listen
to our carefully crafted music that we'd spent hours rehearsing.
Or said, "Oh, we're having a party. Why don't you bring your instruments
and play something?"
And Frankie would get very upset about that. You know, like you tuck your drums under one arm and just turn up at a party. They didn't get that this was. We were trying to make.
I mean, I don't know whether we still have that kind of thing in Jam Today 3. I can remember it in Jam Today 1. Definitely.
Yeah, not so much in Jam Today 3. But we still have got a lot of people wanting us to do benefits.
Yes, there was a lot of benefits. On the other hand, you know, looking back on it, we did have lots of opportunities to play.
We did, yes.
But we did, yes. There was a massive amount there was a lot of political stuff. I mean, in Jam Today 1, we played all sorts of things, squatters' benefits and different political things and feminist things and lesbian things, women's conferences, blah blah blah. And what do we do in Jam Today 3? Things like that. Some of those.
Rock against racism. Rock against
sexism.
I think people are more politically aware in some ways.
I think they were. Yeah.
You know, sort of much more sort of proactive in a lot of ways. You know, let's do this, let's do that. I mean, people do stuff on the web now and sort of things like that. But
I think it's also because that particular time, you're just after all that kind of late 60s and 70s activism.
Yeah.
You know, there was massive. I mean, when I first got involved in the women's movement in the very early 70s, there was all these different groups of feminists. It wasn't just that you were in the women's movement. Were you a Marxist feminist?
Oh, yeah.
It was IMG, the International Marxist Group. There's a Communist Party. Were you a communist feminist? Were you in the International Socialists? There was like different. It was, you know, and then there was kind of separatist feminists. There was so many different kind of groups, and it was. But people talked a lot.
I think it was important to us because the expectation, the world, and by that read men and then other women, was that we weren't going to be very good. It was important to be as good as you could be.
Yes, but I think what I think is interesting is that when we started in Jam Today 1, it was at the height of punk, and we absolutely did not identify in any way with punk.
Yes.
Funnily enough, looking back now, I can sort of see stuff that was great about punk, but we didn't think that at the time. We didn't. I'm not, by the way, I'm not including other people. I'm sure you know you wouldn't.
Think exactly the same as that.
Because a lot of the ethos about punk was
pick up anything and play it.
Yes, that you know anybody could play, and that you and I mean actually I understand a lot of the reasons for punk, because not long before punk there was all that kind of endless, tedious prog rock,
supergroups and all that.
Yeah, it was pretty tedious, but we didn't identify with it at all, and we really wanted to be good. There's massive pressure on women you can't afford as a woman to be not good at what you do, because if you're not good at it, it won't be excused like it might be with a man.
No.
It will be, they're no good because they're a woman, and it's
No,
always been the
exactly.
same, and actually it hasn't changed, I don't
No.
think. So I think we were always absolutely driven to be as good as we could.
With men, there's a kind of triumph of confidence over ability, and with women it's possibly the other way around.
Absolutely.
Women aren't confident enough to step up to the plate.
I think Fran was cutting edge, I have to say that about her,
Absolutely,
because, you
yeah,
know,
God.
she's not said very much, but she was a very important member of the band. Without Fran, you know, you wouldn't have heard us for a start, and you know, things wouldn't have got fixed.
No.
It was
Yeah.
just, she was amazing doing everything that she could do.
Having somebody at the front who we knew we could trust.
Yes, exactly.
To make us sound good.
What do you want to say?
I don't need to say.
Well, actually, she went on. I mean, when we were in the guest stars, she came and she did endless tours all over the world with us in the guest stars, which was also
It was
great.
fun. It was interesting because you were part of the band, but you were also separate and very much on your own as well. Because the band would all be together on the stage, and then I would have to sort of muscle in with the technical people. And they
Reluctant to
vary
come up.
just how much they're prepared to let me have a go on the mixing. And sometimes they were like, oh, no, you can't do that. So, you know, sometimes you have to sort of judge as to what you could do, and also because it different. We played in so many different places, of small, big, and sometimes the equipment did vary a lot, and you had to sort of walk in and. You know, I wasn't carrying my own instrument. Often we were walking into, you know, some gigs we would bring our own equipment in, so obviously that was stuff that we all knew, but then there was, often we went to places where there was all equipment set up, and so I was then having to sort of work out how this mixing board worked. I did used to go, they used to make me go to rehearsals as well.
Did we? Oh, I don't remember
Good thing
that.
too.
You did.
Did we?
So, yes,
Yeah,
because
we did at one
otherwise...
point, not all of them.
No. So it was good as well, because then I would get an idea, an understanding of what they wanted to sound like, and therefore, and I became aware of all the different. I can't really describe it. So I was able to. I don't think there was any particular things that I was mixing towards, other than the
Make it sound
overall.
fantastic.
Yes, making it sound good.
Sometimes, I mean, unfortunately, a lot of the venues had terrible acoustics, and it was just trying to make it sound okay, because sometimes it was like awful echoey halls and things, and it just sort of seemed to wash round and round and round.
We didn't invite the TV, we were asked, and each case we were asked. We didn't go looking to be on television ever, and it was something we wanted. Once we were asked,
very pleased.
we were pleased to
I
have
was
been
extremely
asked, but we
pleased.
didn't go looking.
This whole thing about, are you part of the mainstream? And you know, some people thought you should be part of the mainstream because then you can affect change from within there. In Jam to Day 1, we probably had endless discussions about, you know, would you be, you know, wanting to be outside the music world, and of course we were outside the music world. Nobody wanted us in it anyway. And there's that funny thing where when you get invited to be in it, it's all of a sudden, oh, you know, are we going to say no? Probably not, because we're actually going to be paid. And it actually felt okay.
Because I'd always wanted to be a pop star, you know, as a young singer, and indeed I'd got into an outfit right off the bat that was trying to be a sort of pop thing. We did a bit of TV. I know it's terrible, and so. But I remember it being that no, that's not what that would be selling out. We wouldn't. We were not looking for
Commercial success.
to be you know, picked up by the commercial music business. We saw, and I got right into that. Yeah, okay, fair enough.
I think the thing is, if somebody had come along and said, we'd pay you money to do what you're doing, then you'd go, yeah, fine, because, you know, you're doing what you want to do, singing the songs you want to sing, sending the message out that you want to send, and that's fine.
It was in Jams Day 1, and we were doing a film called Rapunzel, Let Down Your Hair, and we were recording in a very well known, it was well known then, it's where Tubular Bells was recorded, a place called the Barge in Venice. Little Venice.
If only it had been Venice, it would have been so much better.
And that's where we met our first our sound engineer, Sarah Greaves, because she was learning the trade there. And between sessions, she used to have to mix and edit and so on. And there were a lot of liggers, and there was one particular ligger, which is somebody who hangs around studios and bands and isn't really associated with them. And he happened to be there that day while Sarah was doing some of the mixing for our songs, and he said to her, "Makes a cup of coffee, Sarah." And she was actually working, and he wasn't even supposed to be there. And she said, "No, piss off, go make it yourself. I'm working." And he said, "You've become a right stroppy little cow since you met those Jam Today women." And she told us this story, and we thought, if we have got to use this somehow. So when we wanted to do our EP and we needed a name for the record label, I reminded Alison of this story, and I don't know which one of us knew Joe Nesbitt, you probably. And we decided to commission her to draw a cow flinging herself to the left, and Alison did the writing at the top, and that's how the Stroppy Cow logo. And it was an umbrella label, basically overused it. It wasn't that we were record producers or anything. It was just a name for us to use.
It was very different then. I mean, recording was a completely different thing.
Yeah.
It's hard to explain. It's almost like if you think now how easy it is, you know, I mean, you can record stuff at home. I could record stuff at home. And then it was a completely different thing. It cost thousands of pounds. And if you produce, well, it was vinyl albums, even, you know, to produce, you couldn't like do, like you can produce 50 CDs now, 100 CDs, you couldn't, you had to do 3,000 or 5,000 vinyl albums. It was a massive investment. It was a really big deal, and actually I think probably then, I think it's more to do with the times. I think at that point, there were lots and lots of bands who played. We were just typical, we weren't anything special, bands played live, and once in a blue moon you got to do a recording, wouldn't you say?
There'd be lots of stuff on, like little, you know,
cassettes, lots of cassettes,
lots of those,
cassettes of rehearsal, cassettes of gigs, very
distorted, horrible sound,
poor quality.
So yes, it's a shame.
Yes, it is a shame.
There isn't more. Yeah, definitely.
But I mean, we actually do have something recorded from Jam Today 3. We've got virtually nothing, well, hardly anything of Jam Today 1 or Jam Today 2, and that's absolutely typical of the time. It's more to do with that. It's to do with technology and money.
Absolutely.
We just didn't have the money.
We had less money then. We didn't have.
No, we didn't have any money.
But I'm very proud of this EP, not just because it exists, but because we, apart from recording in the studio, we did it all ourselves. Alison did all that writing. The Jam Today logo is Alison's work.
It took me hours.
Alison and I took most of those photographs. You've got to remember how much the technology changed in our lifetime.
Oh God,
we got terribly excited when the Sony Walkman came out. Before that, we were all reel to reel, you know, and suddenly.
No, I don't think we were
portability.
I don't think we were typical of women necessarily. We may or may not have been, but we were actually typical of what was happening at the time in bands and music. There wasn't. It was very hard to record, and you had to have money to record, and most bands didn't.
That's right.
And they were lucky. Most bands didn't get to record until they had a recording deal.
That's right.
So the fact that we actually recorded something was just fantastic, wasn't it?
I sort of pushed that, and I always, because I think when you write, if you're a wordsmith, you want there's no point if people aren't getting what you're saying. And going back to what Jackie's saying, the sound was often so awful in these places, nobody could hear. So half the reason I did it was
struggling
and a lot of words to get in.
Tell me about it. Also, I remember as well, because prior to this time, everybody sang in American transatlantic accents. I remember being told to stop.
You didn't.
Yes.
Well, I don't know that was
Nice English voice here.
Yes, I didn't like it. I didn't like all that Americanisms. But I think it was about
it was like a bit of advertising as well. So we would have our name and address and contact number on the back. It was something people could go away with and maybe give us another gig from. It served quite a few purposes. If we were doing things that people were going to sing along to, I would usually do them to tunes they already, I mean, natty words like your set of values, your set of laws. If I don't, then I'm frigid. If I do, I'm a whore. Your God and your government sternly condemn, make vasectomy compulsory. What would you say then? That was one of something I wrote for the National.
It rolls off the tongue nicely, doesn't it?
And it was to the tune of My Ship Sails from China.
Good Lord.
What is that tune?
I don't know.
Yes, I think so. Abortion is
Okay,
right.
Terry.
Women's. I'm trying to think of it. Women of a.
Why did you ask
you can't have the baby. You've nothing to lose.
She's quite good, by the way, she's quite good at putting words to all kinds of popular songs, in case you're interested.
So she could probably do adverts then, probably now.
Yes, God.
Yeah, so they all sang along to Maybe It's Because I'm a Lesbian.
I don't think we did that one, actually.
No, only at Christmas.
I sometimes think there are a few more women playing, but it really hasn't changed much, given what you think it might have done from when we were all playing, when we first started.
Do you think it's that you just don't see them in the mainstream? Because I'm not really involved in music anymore, so I don't really see this. But you are, and so you see there are more women playing. It's just that we don't see them.
It
on
is
the big screen.
That's correct.
Well, and it formed a part of a much bigger movement. That was the thing, wasn't it? It was an aspect. I mean, women would have been making inroads into lots of other different areas at the same time.
Exactly.
And the consequence of which things are very different now than they were before. And I think about, for example, my two sons, whose attitude to women and what women do and what women are able to do and what they can play or can't play is completely into another place altogether.
Informed in part by their mother.
Yes,
I'm sure that's all.
Yeah, but I mean, you know,
and the women they met.
Yes, and because they spent carted around,
and that's her legacy
with all these lunatics all the time. So yeah, it has. So it's part of a much bigger thing, and the world is a different place now to how it was in terms of gay politics and in terms of sexual politics generally.
Because you do what you do because you love it and you always wanted to do it. I mean, there have always been women who've done things like, Amelia Earhart wanted to fly planes. I don't know how many more women flew planes because of her, but I'm damn sure a lot of women have played guitar because of Deirdre, and a lot of women have played drums because of you, Jackie. The things that women and bass because of Alison. I think that instruments that when we were growing up, I mean, you weren't allowed. I mean, even when you go back a bit further, sitting with your legs around a cello, that wasn't acceptable. Young ladies don't do that. Young ladies don't sit at a drum kit and thrash the bejesus out of it, do they? So I think you can have a subliminal effect on society, and I years later, still people come up to me and say, "Oh, weren't you in jam today?" Or and that just I remember, and I really had a good time. And what more can they say than I enjoyed your music, that I had a good time, and I suppose that's all you can do, and you can hope that somewhere two women turned up, learnt to play the drums, who then passed it on to another 4 women who or played the bass or whatever it was.
I've never thought of it like that. That'd be amazing if that ever happened. Rest easy.
Of course it happened, Jackie.